Today is the third day of the December 89 7-day retreat at Springwater. Two people brought up something in meeting about what was said during a talk yesterday. Actually, one person told me that he was quite angry at what I had said about the Zen tradition. We didn't actually go particularly into that, so I can't say too much about it. But the person mentioned that there is another branch of Zen training in which there is not the pushing, the striving, the achieving. And another person asked, actually I didn't feel in a challenging way, just asked, are you implying that all the teachers who do work with a directed practice, I don't have it verbatim, who do work with assigning directed practices, that all of these teachers don't have it? To that, my immediate response was, that would be utterly presumptuous to make such a statement, wouldn't it? What other people have or don't have. And by that, the implication of what we have. It's so difficult to go into something in all openness without establishing something or seemingly combating someone else. We are trained this way, we think this way, we've always acted this way, and we project this way onto others. And whether or not there is such an element in me, when I talk about it, I have to examine carefully myself. Not to deny it outright from the beginning, there is no such thing, but to look whether there is or not. There may be. And can that filter out so that the vision is clear and the words are unambiguous? Today is not yesterday, but I can only speak right now. What was being explored was how do directed attention or concentration practices affect the mind, or how do they hook into the already existing programs in the mind? Do they? And when I speak about it, I speak from what I discover or have discovered in myself, and together with the people who work here, who come to share with me and with each other. One person once in a retreat was a woman doctor, quite famous, I was told, published and so forth, mentioned to me in the course of a retreat. She says, yes, it is so. The concentration practice that I have been pursuing and that I'm pursuing right here does tranquilize the mind. She said, I can actually feel what part of the brain is being tranquilized. And this is what I do this for. This is what meditation is for me. I do this rather than taking chemical tranquilizers. And we were in communication with each other. We weren't challenging each other, communicating. She never came back to another retreat. But I'm always interested to hear someone says, or someone would say, yes, I am concentrating on the breath. Let's take that because it's the most frequent movement of the body-mind that is concentrated upon. It lends itself superbly for that because it's always there. And things happen when the mind is concentrated on breathing. There is an interference with the thought process, or a slowing down or subduing of it. And with a subduing, slowing down, or interfering with the thought process, there is inevitably a tranquilization of the brain and mind and body, because it is our thoughts, not our thoughts, the thoughts that are brought up in the mind, that issue from memory, recent and most ancient, that the whole body keeps in turmoil. The turmoil of pain, desire, fear, or pleasure. And what I'm interested in is it possible to do this, concentrating on the breathing process, on the inhalation, exhalation, and at the same time be aware of thought processes, what they are, what they do, how they arise, how they connect throughout the body. The subtlety of them, the fleetingness of them, and to really learn as we go about that, because it is this process of thinking which creates the capsule we live in, the enclosure, the limitation, the barriers, the blocks. It also creates all the beautiful things that we have. Like now, I don't know how many spacecrafts going into beyond the planets, into outer space, and transmitting messages back to us about the planets. So, I'm not for one thing and against the other. We're working together in this. Is it possible to do this most desirable and effective of all practices of concentrating on the breathing, and at the same time be aware of how the mind works in motive, in goal, in wanting tranquility, wanting peace? Does that itself come into awareness? The motive, the goal, the misery out of which the wanting comes, the misery of confinement, of isolation, loneliness, separation from, we don't know from what, from each other, maybe from nature. People often who come here say, you talk about walking through the woods, the beauty of it, the sounds of it, and I don't even see and feel it. It's not there for me. I feel numb, cut off. I looked at a branch, one person once told me, with snow on each needle and a breeze shedding the snow and the branch sort of just bobbing up and down. But what came up in the mind was, so what? interest, the passionate interest that exists here in this particular body-mind, in this human being here, in how the mind and body operate alone and in relationship, is not the pursuance of a path or Toni's path. It has been with me. It has imposed itself out of the circumstances of my life, which are not so different from circumstances of each of our life. For one person, it's warfare or persecution. For another, it is abuse, being abused. For another one, a person just recently came to see me, said, I'm not the child of abusing parents. There was no abuse in my family at all. Everything was okay. But there was nothing. We weren't in relationship with each other. There was distance from one to the other. And I grew up dead. I didn't know it, didn't realize it. And only recently, going back home, I realized everybody is dead at home. Not violent, not angry, not cantankerous, just dead, not alive. And they don't know it. And it arose in her an incredible sadness. And why is this so? So from particular circumstances of this particular life, which I've told people, written about it, was the utter meaninglessness of the way we live. Persecuting each other, denouncing each other, torturing each other, bombing each other, killing each other, and psychologically abusing each other. Not necessarily just out there in that world, but at home. Why be born into this mess? That was the question. Is there any meaning? And that question stuck. It wasn't a giving up. It was a live question with no answers, because everything that was seen around one was not of meaning, including the religions that had been taught. Maybe very superficially, because my parents were not religious. I picked it up myself from pictures and stories, Bible stories, Old and New Testament. And if there was a God, why did he, that's what he was, it was a he, let that happen to his children? And not to give an answer. Leave all the questions open so that the mind begins to explore and look in the light of exploration. It became so clear over many, many years of looking, reading, examining, training in a tradition, that nothing short of direct insight into this mind and body as it functions in this moment will be a freeing from it. That there's a miraculous thing that if the truth of something is seen, that in that there is a freeing, not in any practices that may have preceded that. And this is what the mind does, the brain does. It tries to constantly establish cause and effect relationships. Something is come upon, a moment of insight, a moment of freedom, a moment of no division, no violence in the heart, just love overflowing. And then the brain says, what did I do previous to this, that this is the result of? Because I want to reproduce it. Not just for myself, but for others. Because it's the other amazing thing at a moment of deep joy or no selfness, no division. There comes the real urge to share this with others. And the feeling it must be somehow or other shareable. But one has to be open and sensitive and careful, not to assume anything, not to assume that one can hand things over, pass things on. Pass on the path I trod as the way to this. I have nothing to do with it, very little. This thing, which we just talked about, I may be mistaken, but it has no cause. It doesn't come as the result of a cause, as the effect of a cause. Everything else in our life does. Constant cause and then a reaction to the cause, and then the reaction becomes its own cause and has more effects, more reactions. But this is the freedom from that causation, from that chain of reaction, counter-reaction, and more reaction. It's the freedom from that. Why? Some questions one leaves open. They don't even. One sees where they come from. Come from this brain which forever wants to know and make sure, formulate, categorize, theorize, put into concepts, theories, with which it has done astonishing things. But here, in this realm, it doesn't apply. So, to teach directed concentration has tremendous effects, tremendous benefits, as in the case of the person who told me didn't have to take chemical tranquilizers. There's more energy, there's almost instant feedback if one is so constituted to be able to concentrate. There are people who are not. This was the problem when I was teaching in that tradition. The most frequently brought problem was, how can I concentrate better on my breathing? There, the practice was there, was given. But the problem was how to do it. My mind forever goes here and there. That's what the mind does. And some people, instantly there is concentration. There's something in the mind that has a talent for that. And for other brains, that this talent does not exist. Maybe improve a little bit, but over the years, but not to the extent it is for someone else. Power of concentration, because other elements other factors may enter in, like how motivated one is to be good at it, to excel. And with that, we're not denigrating religious training traditions, but we're looking at the mind, how it is conditioned to be, as one person put it, top of the class. And therefore in competition with whoever may be there already or on the way. It's not sacrilegious to look at this in the midst of religious training. But usually it doesn't happen because the tradition is revered and needs to be preserved for the sake of the beginners. Although in working for many, many years now, it's interesting that so-called beginners who have not been trained to concentrate have a relatively easier time of observing the mind than someone who for years has been trained in concentrating. As to the question, don't we get this training, or it is given to us in order to get beyond the mind, beyond the self? That we talked about yesterday, that brings in time. Do this first as a means for getting that, and I question that. No one has to question it with me. We're free in all of this. To do or to let be. Of course, one can question the freedom that we have. What is that? We think we're free. All the people bursting through that Berlin Wall. What a sight it was, even on a little television screen. Bursting through some little openings in a long 12-year-old or 20-year-old, I don't know how old, wall to freedom. Climbing into the American embassy for freedom. Are we free? Are we free in this country? Free from conditioned thinking, conditioning symbols, conditioned desires, wants, needs, which dictate our daily behavior, our daily actions, interactions. We are as conditioned as everyone else, in front of a wall or behind a wall. But we have incredible supermarkets. Every time one puts one's foot into a new one is utterly amazed, where you now find your aisle and your item through a computer. They're so huge you couldn't find it by yourself, but you can tip on a computer and there it appears. The cheese is in aisle such and such. Can you imagine someone from East Germany or Russia being put into that? Sort of, maybe as by magic. I remember the day we crossed the border between Germany and Switzerland, 1946 or 7. It was like a step out of night into day, out of deprivation into abundance, even though Swiss had felt they were, I think they had had some kind of rationing. There was a piece of bread lying in the street. That was a sign you were in a different country. And all the lights, the stores at night. But what is freedom? Not the flag of it, the symbol of it, the enthusiasm and ecstasy of the word. Somebody the other night was commenting, I think it was a poet or writer, that these young people there, it was in Czechoslovakia, they really know what they want, and the camera focused on them and they were jumping up and down, with flags and jubilant. These young people, they know what they want. And I'm not putting down the ecstasy of breaking out of the wall and what happened behind the wall. I'm just asking, are we free? Is one free? Or do one's actions and thoughts and emotions and interrelationship come out of new and old and ancient conditioning, unawares? There it is, and there's the problem. Here, into this is all open-ended and loose-ended. So I may have not pursued something. If you wish to pursue it, let's do it in the meeting. And don't feel that you have to bring something in order to keep me inspired or happy. We can just sit there quietly, listening to the radiator ticking, the clocks. We have two of them which go da-da, da-da. They're not quite synchronized. The wind or the birds, the breath. It's all open. So here another question comes in. Somebody saying something like this: when I sit and the mind has slowed down, following the breathing, sitting erect, for a moment everything is perfection. At that moment I don't think, and the person referred to a character in a present movie which I haven't seen but I read about it. At that moment he said, I don't think of the garbage glut, of the Brazilian forests being chopped down, or all the other mess in the world. And yet there was the feeling in bringing this up and looking at it together, as something is paradoxical there. The perfection felt, in no problem here, and yet the mess in the world continuing. This is this comes up a lot, doesn't it? What is the relationship between my sitting here doing this work and the horrendous problems in the world? War, terrorism, countries cruelly subjugating each other or inward in themselves. Starvation, garbage glut. The pollution of the atmosphere, the abuse of the earth. Is there any connection? First of all, I wonder about this, the perfection. I don't think we talked about it at the time. What is one referring to when one says there is a state of perfection? Because one may have been, and pardon me for bringing this up again, I have no chip on the shoulder. One may have been indoctrinated that basically, principally, from the beginning, we are perfect and complete. One may have chanted that once a day or more than once a day. And a concept has formed in the mind. And one must not underestimate the power of concepts, inspirational concepts or ideas or symbols, to arouse energy throughout the body and mind. So is this felt state of perfection connected with the idea of perfection that I basically have or am? It's, if one is interested, the idea coming up and the instant outpouring of chemicals throughout the body is palpably observable. It can be seen, it can be perceived directly. If the mind is so oriented and open to and interested in finding out about itself and not invested in its own ideas for the sake of security or inspiration, safety, but that identification itself is also open to perception, to observation. As we go, as we relate, as we talk, read, argue with each other, one can find out or wonder, am I invested here because I got so angry or upset or energy welled up? It's the beauty of this work. Everything is open to inspection and worthy of it. There's nothing that is not worthy of pausing to look and listen, wondering what it is, what it's doing, how it arises, and maybe withers away. Or with the statement there is a state of perfection, is there meant a state of no self-consciousness? No, none of these walls that we build around ourselves out of ideas of what we are, what we must be, what is our just due, how we've suffered, and so forth. All of these, we'll talk much more about it in the course of this retreat. All the ideas and images and memories, past, present, and future about me, if that is absent for a moment, not there, then what is there? Then is there really just what is, without a feeling of separation? The light, the warmth, the smell in the air, the trees or the person sitting right next to one, the music of the radiator. Personally, I wouldn't call that a state of perfection. It's just what is. But it has something about it when the me isn't trying to grab it or make something out of it. File it within its filing system. There's something about that that is more than the sum of all the parts that we've listed. But then the next moment, what happens? Find out. How can I keep it, preserve it? Or, maybe in this case, what's the relationship between this and the garbage glut of the world? Which, even though I wasn't thinking at it for a moment and therefore it wasn't there, the moment I think about it, it is there. Just by not thinking about the war, the terrorism, whatever's going on in the countries, doesn't mean it has stopped. It's going on. It's a fact. Maybe not quite as the media show us, but there's some truth about that. People killing each other, little children carried away bleeding. Because of a drive for power, wanting to have power, wanting to support certain interests, making allies with certain factions and supporting these allies. Everybody does it, and we do it. Trying to find allies in our small petty problems to give us support. Strength, a feeling of strength in the face of our adversary. What I'm wondering right now at this moment is why we divide ourselves from the mess of the world in the first place. Why do we think that we're something separate from this world out there? Because we think we are separate, then we make a tremendous problem out of bringing some connection between me and this world. Try to build a bridge to it, or find an explanation or a way to help the world. But am I separate from the world? Can one ask this question? Is one concerned and interested in this? What has made me, informed me, influenced me, educated me? What lines of chromosomes and genes and DNA have already met in egg and sperm from the infinite past? The world, what we call the world or the society, has impacted this new, apart from from all the hereditary factors, which also come from not just my mom and dad, all of their ancestors. And then the moment, not just the moment one is out already in the uterus, the state of the family. There's conflict, strife, maybe poverty. All of this already affecting the fetus. All the influences of the parents, older sisters and brothers or younger ones, friends, children, teachers, the economic environment, the social environment, the cultural environment, where we live, what climate we live in, how we eat. All of this has resulted in this year. All the things I've read and heard, been impressed by. My father said how he put his cigarette case away into his vest pocket. Affected me tremendously. I had to smoke and put something away like that and tap the cigarette like he did. Puff it like he did. And what religion or non-religion one grew up in has informed us, affected us, conditioned us deeply. What nationalism one has grown up under. These things are passed on. They're not invented or made or created by an individual human being. We are the creations of this, and we pass it on to our children. We were visiting our children, they now live in Toronto. And over Thanksgiving, we walked into their house, and up the stairs there's a little American flag. Ben put it up. It's his flag. I'm not saying it's right or wrong, good or bad. But I also admit I was happy that he will, starting today, today's Monday, isn't it? Tuesday. Be in a school where he doesn't pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States. I don't know whether Canadians do that. Do they pledge allegiance to the flag of Canada? Or Quebec? Although one can maybe not do something like this on the surface and yet deep down be identified. If we want to find out about ourselves, we've got to go all the way. All the way. Not stop at this ism or that, but all the way. Identity with this feeling of being a separate individual, separate from the world. And therefore either in conflict with the world or trying to help the world. Feeling guilty if one doesn't do enough for the world. And yet each one of us is part of this world. Represents it. The whole world, all the influences and ongoings of this world manifest in us as individual human beings. That's why we're not individuals. In that sense of being indivisible. We manifest the influences, we justify them, we're invested in them, identified with them. Or else we rebel against them, but that's no freedom. Rebellion is no freedom. It has that which it rebels against rooted within the rebellion. It's not free. So, in beginning to look inwardly, openly, not in any systematic fashion, but with whatever comes up, honestly. It's not easy. It's not easy to look honestly, freely within. One comes into all the blockages. One doesn't want to look because one has these images of how one should be. and wants to be, and they prevent looking honestly how one actually is. But in working with it, talking about it, listening to a talk, discussing it, something moves and there is more insight into oneself honestly, what goes on, and one can see the whole spectrum of movements that take place in the world also take place in oneself. Starting with the garbage glut. And the immense wastage of our resources, our energies. This is just analogous to garbage glut and chopping down the Brazilian forests. The waste of this organism, which is the most precious resource, or one of the precious resources that has come forth here on this earth. A human body and mind with its incredible potential sensitivities. Possibilities of perception and maybe love. Love, compassion. Compassion meaning passion with everyone and everything. Can that be approached afresh? This body-mind? Not in terms of its ideal state, but its actual state, right now. If there isn't clarity in the human being, and the freedom to look and examine as we go, how can we clean up the garbage glut effectively? We may find ways, but we may battle over the ways, cause new combat. There was an interesting article in the Newsweek. I didn't get to read very much of it, but there's so much dissension. Nobody wants it. Of course we don't want it in our backyard. We wouldn't want a dump here on Springwater Hill. Always someplace else. Somebody else's backyard is okay. Can one just face all of that? Face the immense problem of our thinking self-centeredly. Out of a capsule, as we recently put it. Living in a capsule and thinking out of this capsule or within this capsule. And all of these different capsules in constant collision with each other. Cursing it on the one hand and holding on to it the next moment. Somebody said, you seem to be talking pretty much solely about what goes on in this mind and body, the self and so on, all the problems of the self, but you never talk or say anything, whether there's anything beyond that. Is there anything beyond that? Is one missing that? Does one miss talk about something beyond the self? I think this talk today sort of spoke to that unless we understand the self thoroughly from moment to moment, all the beyond is an illusion, a concept, a hope, an attachment, an investment, or name it what you want. It becomes another goal for the self to engage and to invest itself in. Expecting some reward, some return. Somebody said that today. I've been doing this for I don't know how many years, 10, 15 years, and never saw until last night or whenever that there is a subtle expectation of a reward in this. And you could say, well, so what? We know that. But if somebody sees that directly as a tremendous discovery, not so much what is discovered, but that there is a discovery going on, that something is seen directly, without any veiling, without any imagery, just the fact of the expectation of a just due for all this work, for all that one has suffered. Not just during this work, but before that brought one to this work. So is there something beyond the self? And should one talk about it? Or is it possible to talk out of that? To talk and listen out of that which is not self. The spaciousness of it, the lightness, the emptiness of it, and the love and compassion that miraculously, unfathomably is there to be come upon when the self is quiet, not encapsulating, and therefore not in collision with other capsules. We will end here for today.